Hello, you're listening to Tranquility du Jour, a series of nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, and love sharing ways to find more beauty and balance in everyday life. In this episode, 610, I'm talking about my journey back to the stage after a hip replacement. So you're going to hear about the challenges, the joys, the time and energy commitment, and more. I'm also going to offer you a downloadable worksheet and some journaling questions to help you in pursuit of your own dreams. So thinking back, what are those dreams that you had as a child, or things that you loved as a child, or dreams that you've had for a while? And I'll say, one of mine was to be on point shoes, right? To be back in point shoes. And so that is kind of what this whole piece is about, right? It's like my journey to stage on point after a hip replacement. And I hope too that it will inspire you as you think about your own dreams, your own challenges, and some ways to actually move forward in pursuing those dreams. All right, so let's dive in. So first of all, I want to say a big thank you to everyone for your super thoughtful notes around my birthday, which was June 30th. And it was a big one, right? It was a milestone. I turned 50. And I was sharing with my partner that, I just felt as if this was like a week after my birthday, that I felt, I don't know, like puzzle pieces just kind of weren't fitting together. There was nothing wrong, right? But there was a lot of change and transition because over the past 6 weeks, I've been away almost 4 of those. And so, traveling and being out of your typical routine or your typical lifestyle, it's a bit disorienting. Nothing bad, just disorienting. Then I realized in addition, I had this performance and something that I had worked on for 9 months, you guys, 9 freaking months. And in the process was also recovering, right, this hip replacement that has not gone very smoothly. And I probably will need another surgery this summer. And so, that is also a bit disorienting. And then on top of that, the other piece that I realized was that I also was just feeling like, 50, it's a big deal, right? So there was the traveling, there was the 9 months of work towards a goal, which was performing on stage on point. So in addition to the travel, the 9 months of effort for a 2-minute and 45-second performance, then there was also turning 50, which comes with its own can of worms, so to speak. None of these are bad, right? But there was just a lot. There's a lot that has been kind of swirling ever since leading up to the festival, but then also, after the festival ended. So the festival ended Thursday night. My birthday was on Friday. And then after that, we headed out into the mountains for a few days, and I'll share an Instagram reel of the beautiful, beautiful setting. It was truly magical and a wonderful way to tie a bow around the birthday celebrations. And yet it also has just left me a little like, oh my gosh, like, okay, back to reality. It's so hard, I think, to have like life pulled out from under you in an exciting way, but still life pulled out from under you. And then you're like, okay, now what? So I won't be traveling, right? I'm going to be back home, which is exciting. I really can't wait to kind of begin nesting again. I am now 50, right? So there's acclimating to that, which is, it is what it is. What's so funny, you guys, is that morning. So the morning of my 50th, I wake up to vomit on my pillow because my dog, Gizmo, just always has digestive stuff. And I'm like, of course I'm starting my 50th this way. So anyway, it's just kind of funny. But, it's like, okay, so these things happen and I'm experiencing some disorientation and, the end of a big, big goal, right? And now it's like, now what? And of course, people are asking and I'm wondering myself, okay, what do we want to perform next year? And I'm thinking definitely classical ballet again, but maybe like to something like La Vie en Rose or, just something that's like a little different. So TBD, definitely to be determined, but it's absolutely on my mind. And if you have suggestions, definitely send them my way. So let's talk about kind of just a little history with regard to dance for anyone. It's funny. I actually have heard from a few of you that are like, inspired. I've looked up some adult ballet classes in my neighborhood or in my, in my town, right? So some of you live in the country in a rural environment or like, oh, I'm looking for classes. The great thing is there's so many online. I mean, I have taken in the past 3 years, maybe 4 or 5 in-person ballet classes. So the great news is you can do them from anywhere because there's so many great online sources. And I have links to them in the show notes for this episode, but I'll just kind of throw them out to you. Broche Ballet, BROCHE Ballet online is where I take some classes. And then Ballet Academy East is where I also love taking classes and have since the start of pandemic. And that's where I found a couple of my private teachers who I just adore. One who I've worked privately with for 3 years now, and one who I've worked with for about 6 months privately, and she's just amazing. So anyway, the great thing is I share all that of just saying that there's a lot of opportunity out there for adult ballet, and there was this whole festival, right? So it's so fun to see the evolution of this. So in case you did or didn't do ballet as a child, I do think that it is a bit like riding a bike a little bit. And I think some things become muscle memory, but ballet is really, really hard. So I performed in grade school. I got on point in grade school. And then in junior high and high school was also on point here and there, never anything serious. Like it was more just, it was very, very casual, right? And then more into high school, I moved into another kind of type of dance, like the pom-pom squad, right? And then after that, I didn't really dance much. I tried a little bit of hip hop and it was really, really embarrassing, but it was so much fun. I just wish I could have done it behind like closed doors. Because what's funny with hip hop, it's so good. And a lot of dance teachers do this where they teach you something, you practice it, and then you break into groups and then you show it. And it's just humiliating when, for like me, I don't get choreography quickly. So I'm often left in the dust. And then whenever you're supposed to perform it in front of a group, like I really blank. And so that's hard. But oh my gosh, I don't say that to discourage you, because taking hip hop or those other kinds of dance classes like jazz, all that, so much fun too. But it's all just hard. It's hard to know and to practice moving your body. And so I really got back to ballet in 2018 in January. I went with a friend of mine, Carol, to the Washington Ballet, and I was like, okay, let's do this. And then I got really into it. And then in 2019, did a little ballet boot camp piece and from Dawn Q, which was so fun and so hard. And it was, I don't know, it was maybe a minute, right? It was very, very quick, although it felt like forever. And we all performed it at the end of the weekend, and that was really fun. And I've got a video of that. That's up on YouTube for anyone who would be interested. And then I just really kept kind of pursuing and wanting to grow. And so I performed Lilac Fairy, which my teacher, Sean Kelly, choreographed for the International Adult Ballet Festival. And then kind of at the last minute, I threw my hat in the ring. And I won the silver, which was so exciting. And then 2 weeks later, I had a hip replacement. But it was a really fun experience. And the fact that it was like, my teacher didn't even know I was competing. So that night, I, sent him a photo of the medal. I'm like, I won silver. And he was so proud of me, but he was like, I didn't even know you were competing. And I think it was just the last minute. I was like, oh, why not? I've put all this work and effort into the solo, why don't I throw my hat in the ring? And then one second place. So I was very excited. So then I have a hip replacement 2 weeks later and was pretty immobilized. I had my cane, I had my walker, and then I, got around with that. And I was able to get back into my office to see clients, maybe 4 to 6 weeks after the hip replacement because I have quite a bit of stairs. I had to go up and down the stairs. And believe it or not, almost a year later, and I still struggle with stairs. Stairs are so hard for me. I mean, I don't want to say impossible, but almost. Like I'm just really weak, despite the fact that all of the pieces for my solo and all of the effort that I've done with PT on my left hip, and in my solo and in the group piece that I did on point, which was the pink fairy. I was a pink fairy for Sleeping Beauty. Again, all on the left leg. I'm like, why is it all on the left leg? But that left leg is really strong from all the PT and from all the performing on it. But it still is weak inside, really, really weak. And what one surgeon has figured out, or at least thinks, because it also hurts a lot still, and what he thinks is happening is when I had the surgery, my femur cracked, and there's a metal band around my femur that is no longer needed because the femur has healed. The bone heals quite quickly, I understand. But what is happening is that metal band is irritating a bursa, because we have these bursa sacs around all our joints. Never even heard of this until recently. But apparently it's irritating it. And so that's where all of this inflammation and discomfort is coming from. At least that's what one surgeon thinks. So the idea is to have that metal band removed. And the hope is then I won't have so much irritation of the bursa. So in turn, I've been getting cortisone shots and continuing the PT, where most people don't do PT super long after a replacements, but I've been at it a year. So just to give an idea, right, on, all that goes into the healing journey. And I'm definitely not in pain, right? Like what I was before the hip replacement. So whenever I was performing Lilac Fairy, I was in a lot of pain. I remember, there's this one point where you kind of like extend your leg out to the side and back. And with the left leg, I was like, oh my gosh, please, I cannot wait for this to be the last time I have to do this, because it was so, so painful. And I just couldn't get it up as high without a lot of pain. So it's nice to not have that kind of pain, but it's a new kind of pain, which hopefully once I had this next surgery to remove the band, that will go away. So I kind of say snookered, because that's not quite right. But my surgeon, I was really eager to get back to ballet and a little pushy. And, initially it was my understanding we probably would just need like 2 months and then could get back to it. And then I kept hearing 3 months. And so I remember having, maybe it was a 2-month checkup or whatever. And I was like, could I just do like some plies, or that probably would have been all I asked about, because that was a concern really with the hips, right? So plies. And he was like, sure, just be careful. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, he just gave me the green light to go back to ballet. So late September, which is 2 months after surgery, I started doing just like really gentle intro to ballet classes, and very gentle at the bar, like no grand plies, which is going all the way down, like, just little baby plies. So I got back in the door a little sooner, which was really nice. And then we began working on a solo. I'd asked a friend of mine who lives in New York, what do you think would be a nice solo? And next, because I really like the Adagio, I like romantic tutus, which are the longer ones. I just like kind of the old stuff, right? And this was a classical piece, so Chopin. And anyway, it was just really beautiful. So she recommended Les Sylphides Prelude. And that's what I did. And it really was beautiful. Like every time I heard the music, it moved me, right? There's something beautiful about classical music and certain kinds of music that just moves you. And that's definitely what I felt with this piece. So that's where I came up with Les Sylphides. Thank you, Monica. And then, was back to weekly private sessions pretty much with my teacher shortly thereafter. And then we began working on this piece, the choreography for this piece. And then we met up 4 times in person. So in December, I met up with a girlfriend in New York, and I had a private session with him. And in February, I went up to see Sleeping Beauty Ballet in New York with Monica, and then met up with Sean And then I had 2 other meetups in April and then in June. And I'll share an Instagram reel. I have to get it created still, but I'll share a reel that just kind of notes the progress so that you can see, because sometimes it's like you watch something on stage, which honestly still, even just watching that performance, which took me quite a few days to watch, I would give myself like a 70%, maybe 75, right? There were so many things that it's like I missed or, that I missed, that just I didn't quite nail it. And so, we look at those things and we think, oh, like it was lovely, right? And it was lovely, but it also missed the mark in quite a few ways. But if you compare it to my early starts with Les Sylphides, it's just fun to see the evolution and the progress. And, of course, I'm not a professional. I'm not going to get 100%, but it is helpful to be like, okay, so you went from 10% to 70%. Pretty good. So, the one thing that I will say that I think is really fun about this year's journey to stage is I didn't know if I was going to be able to do points. My goal was the solo on point. That was just like my next kind of push, right? And I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it because I just was having all these hip issues still. I was just finding out about the bursa situation. I was getting cortisone shots. I was back in PT a lot. And my progress, right? I just was like, I don't know if I could get on point and do a solo. And then it was offered for our group pieces. She offers 2 group pieces that we learn on Zoom, and then we stage and then perform, during the festival. One was Sleeping Beauty, and it was a pink fairy, which was on point. And when I found out that there was a pink option with a solo piece in the group piece, I thought, okay, that's my motivation. And so I started doing twice weekly point classes with one of my favorite teachers from Ballet Academy East, and she got me there. I mean, it was probably within a month, right? So that's a lot of classes. That's 8 private classes. But I would say, or I guess that's 1, 2, that's 8 math. But, I was like feeling pretty good. And I thought maybe I can do this. And so I was playing at home on this tiny little Marley mat that's like, I don't know, the size of a dining room table. I was playing with points for the solo, and I was like, maybe I could do it. And I remember texting Sean around Easter. So this is in April going, I don't want to get too cocky, but I'm feeling pretty good on point right now. And when I say cocky, I was just worried, like, am I going to injure myself, right? So anyway, I kept doing the private lessons, got strong enough for the pink fairy piece, which was so exciting because that was like an added bonus, which by all the hard work to become a pink fairy, that allowed me to have the strength to do the point piece for my solo. So it was just amazing because I really didn't have a chance, by the time that I was able to get back on point, which was like January or February, I really didn't have a chance of, getting this solo, which I was still learning the choreography and feeling comfortable moving on point. So the private sessions definitely helped, and the cortisone injections probably helped too. So at this point also, I'm doing regular ballet classes. I mean, almost daily. And those are like bar and center work, doing weekly privates with Sean, doing twice weekly with Anne for a couple of months, right? And then we went down to weekly. And, it's a lot of ballet, right? It's a lot of scheduling of things. And then, the piece that I found really kind of challenging along the way was, I had to clear my calendar and set expectations with others. So in March, I realized I really didn't have any openings to meet up with people until July. I mean, things were just full. If I wasn't doing like a ballet class or a ballet practice or a private session or physical therapy or with my clients, then maybe we were coming out to the cabin. Now, I could definitely still do ballet out here, but I wasn't in DC and able to meet up with friends. So it was just this weird time of like, yeah, I'd love to see you, but it'll be 4 months, right? So that was a little tough to adjust to. But, life is much more open now. So cleared the calendar, set expectations with others, realized that, okay, until July, I just have to hunker down. And then we get to the festival. Okay, so we did a road trip because we traveled with the dogs who cannot be left alone. And we did a road trip where we stayed in St. Augustine, which is an adorable, adorable city in Florida. And then we went on to Miami. So at the very last in-person practice that I had with Sean, I went up to New York, and Sean and Ann, I practiced with both of them. And I had just come back from Paris with my mom and was seeing clients, and then went up to New York. I was exhausted. And of course, I still pushed through because it was really an only opportunity for my last in-person before the festival. So I'm doing it was a 4-hour practice, and I'm doing an hour and a half into it, and just my toes were not cooperating. And so I was really sad because I was exhausted. My toes were exhausted and hurting in the point shoes, so I couldn't practice in them. And usually the 4 hours flies by, so I was not feeling great. And I texted a friend of mine who is a dancer, a belly dancer, and she was so sweet. And she wrote back and she was like, Kimberly, this is for you to enjoy. And that was one of those things that I have to keep remembering, because I don't know why that can be hard for me sometimes, but I'm like, I push. I show up for my rehearsals. I show up for my private sessions. I, do all the things. And yet the enjoyment part, I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. That is important. And that was so helpful because, again, it was one of those times where I just left the rehearsal, again, my last in person, my 1 of 4, and I just felt yucky. I just was really disappointed in myself. And the reminder to enjoy just eased it immediately. The tears stopped, and I went to a jazz show in New York, and went back to DC that night, and I was okay, right? I was like, okay, I'm going to get through this. But then we get to the festival, and I'm not sleeping well. For some reason, I'm waking up every morning at 4:30. I do not know why. That is not a regular thing for me at all. Again, my point shoes were hurting. I thought that the shoes were dead, and instead, so I bought new shoes, and they weren't working. So I'm like, it's not the shoes. Something's wrong. And that was really frustrating. I was feeling just super out of sync, lack of confidence, lack of balance. Like I wasn't, I take the beginner classes there. I'm by no means at like some fancy level, but I just was not feeling good. Dress rehearsal comes around. I remember being in the wings before I came out. I was 4th in the program. So, early on, and just feeling teary before I even got onto the stage. And I don't know why. Like, I don't know, but it was one of those things where you just feel like, oh, I've worked so hard and here I am. And I thought I would try out a new pair of point shoes during the dress rehearsal. Okay, so anyway, it did not go well. I remember walking off the stage and going and sitting with a friend who was filming it for me. And I'm just crying. And she's like, you did great. I'm just like crying. And I just didn't feel great. Felt horrible about it. And one of the girls next to me was like, do you need water? Like, she was so sweet. And I was like, I didn't need anything. I just wanted to hide. And I sent Sean a text message. And I remember I was like, I sent it to, my other private teacher. I'm like, worst ever, in tears, but okay. And, it's just like, I wish I could hold that person, that part of me, because she was so disappointed, right? Like, work 9 months, get to dress rehearsal, and it's really the worst run of the piece maybe that you've ever done. Like, it just felt horrible. And so I got through that. I don't know how. I slept. I took a bath. I talked to Sean. I got sweet text messages from Anne. And I just like let myself feel what I was feeling, And then the festival day comes around, the performance. And I kept hearing from friends or a friend who does a lot of performing. And then my teachers are like, they say bad dress rehearsal means good performance. So I had that to hold on to. And, one of my teachers too was like, you're supposed to, this is for you to have fun. Like, let this be fun. Right. And I don't know what the pressure was about. I mean, I think, I did really want to win the gold, having won the silver last year. I really wanted to perform on point. I was doing that. I'm not sure what it was. But anyway, I got out there. I'm in the wings, and I'm in the wings from like the first group on because you want to be like ready and waiting. And I remember giving my phone and a cup of water to the sound engineers and, just waiting in the wings and doing some like roll throughs and just some little like releves and, things to kind of warm up in the back. And then when it was my time to go, like I felt good. Like I wasn't nervous. I wasn't nervous like I was for the dress rehearsal. And I felt good. I was in my old point shoes that had done me good through lots of rehearsals and lots of practices. I thought they were dead, but they did great that night. I used some biofreeze. I taped up my toes. I did all sorts of things and they felt fine. I made it through. And so I felt really good, and I felt good in Sleeping Beauty because I was finally like hitting some of the cues and getting the pieces somewhat aligned. That was a hard one for me to learn. It was like a 5-minute piece, and all the fairies were in different colors and doing different things. And anyway, I loved my fellow pink fairy, Joyce. We worked really well together. And so I was happy to get through that. And then there was the finale piece, which was like flower waltz. And we had live like violinists, and it was very, very beautiful. I totally messed something up, but I was in the back and I was like, what? I don't care. This is the last piece. Like, I'm so like just done. But it was fun. It was like 2.5 hours, and I had 3 performances in it. And then there was cocktail hour, which was super fun. And it was great to see everyone. Everyone's in good spirits because it's like all over, like the pressure is over. And then we had a lovely dinner, and then the award piece started. And, I didn't know. I thought that I had a possibility of placing because I felt pretty strong about my performance, but I didn't know, right? I was like, you just don't know. And they announced 3rd place, 2nd place, and then 1st place for the beginner classical division. And I won, and I was over the moon. I was so, so happy. And it really was a big goal of mine. And it just was like the cherry on top after 9 months replacement, the journey getting back into point shoes, and all the work that was involved in that, and all the pain. And I don't even just mean physical pain, but emotional pain, right? There's just been so much in the healing of this hip. So the whole journey back onto stage 2.0, a year later, because last year it was on my birthday was the performance, and this year is June 29th. So then the next day I turned 50. I wake up to gizmo vomiting in my pillow at 2 a.m. Poor guy, he was so sick. And then, we traveled to Savannah for the night, and then we were in the mountains of North Carolina, in this gorgeous, gorgeous place. And I'll put up an Instagram reel just highlighting it, that I had found through Bring Fido. If you guys who travel with dogs don't know about Bring Fido, check it out. And they had, maybe back in January, featured their top Airbnbs dog-friendly Airbnbs in each state. This was the one for North Carolina. And I just was like, oh my gosh, it's magical. It's European looking, and it just had yummy amenities such as this deep soaking tub that overlooked the forest, and just gorgeous, gorgeous. And then we headed back to the cabin in West Virginia. and was there for about 4 days. And then we are heading back to DC. And I returned to work once we got back to West Virginia. I had clients on Thursday and Friday, and it felt really good. I'd missed my clients, and I was eager to catch up and hear what was going on in their worlds and how they were doing. And then, we'll be back to reality in my office on Monday. And so thank you for following along in this journey. And again, thank you for all your really, really sweet comments after my rough dress rehearsal and my performance and ultimately my 50th. I so appreciate it. And I'm so excited to work with many of you in the new salon that is happening and at the virtual retreat that's happening on Saturday. And all the fun things that we have coming up in the rest of the year. Now, let's turn this to you. So I really want to emphasize joy and personal fulfillment in pursuing passions as an adult. And, as I mentioned in a couple of my love notes as around my birthday, it's like it never is too late. And I know oftentimes it can feel that way. And with adult ballet, it's like, okay, I'm not auditioning for some company. That's never going to happen for me. And I know that. And yet it's like, how can I just do my very best and put my very best out there and come up with new goals for myself? Like one thing is I was thinking, okay, what's a ballet goal for the next year? And I would say, okay, to be able to do a pirouette on point would be a big next step. Pirouettes are very hard for me. Point is quite challenging for me. So to be able to do a pirouette on point, say maybe a goal for this next year. So for you, in case this is helpful, I want you to download the worksheet that I have at KimberlyWilson.com/610. And here are my 4 kind of ideas for you. And then I'll give you the journal prompts. First off, name your dream. So for me, it was solo on point, right? And consider where you start from. So I started from having won the silver last year and a new hip and, needing to recover from that and then relearn points and develop and really progress in point. Okay. So name your dream, right? Get very clear. Like, what is it you want? So I just threw out there a pirouette on point is what I want by next year. Create a plan, right? So my plan was like, okay, I need to learn the choreography. I need to have my private lessons. I need to practice in between. I, need to set aside time in my calendar and make sure this is all slated out and prioritized. So for you, what would that be? What is your plan? What would be a plan that would help you achieve that dream? And this goes along a lot with my Sunday, which is whenever I say Sunday, I mean June 9th, 2023, depending on when you're listening to this, love note that went out on the dance between doing and dreaming, right? So we dream and then we need to create a plan. And then honoring your progress. And this is something that I feel like is not a strength of mine. I really want to savor and enjoy, as my friend told me, and as one of my teachers was like, enjoy this journey. But honoring your progress along the way, right? So it was fun to do videos of my practices, my in-person practices, and then to be able to look at, okay, my teacher's always like, okay, so a few good things, and we'll point those out, and then the things that he noted for us to work on. So thinking about your progress, and it's hard, right? Because it's like watching your hair grow. It's slow and tedious, especially with something like technical, right? Like ballet. So for you, how can you measure and honor your progress? Because it really is important. And again, I share this with you that it is one of those things where I want to do better at, and I really want to grow and be better at enjoying the journey. And then last but not least is celebrate your efforts. And I really felt like that those 4 days in North Carolina in this beautiful place was my celebrating of efforts. I also feel like it's important, that you give yourself something. I mean, I haven't really it's not like I'm purchasing something for myself. Sometimes people do that, right? Something to commemorate the experience. Maybe it's like you have a little party, or maybe you go out to tea with a friend, or you start working on your next piece. I mean, however you would like to celebrate. But I do think this is one of the pieces that is most often overlooked and forgotten. And yet it's critical because we want to know that we matter to ourselves, right? So 1, name your dream. 2, create a plan. 3, honor your progress. And 4, celebrate your efforts. And celebrate, when I say to your efforts, I mean kind of the culmination, whatever the ending is. So, if the ending, like say your goal, this is just a silly one I'll throw out there. Name your dream. Okay, it is to have a green smoothie a day for the next month. All right. Create a plan. Okay, so you determine, is it going to be breakfast, lunch, dinner? Honor your progress, maybe the first week, the second week, third week. And then the 4th week, celebrate your efforts, celebrate the culmination of the goal. Like, okay, here I am. I did it. And then noting, like, how does it feel? What do you notice? What shifts have transpired? How are you eating differently? How are you feeling differently? Right? So it can be whatever. Your dream can be like a nice small one, or it could be a nice big one, whatever feels relevant to you at this stage in your life right now. So last but not least, I want to give you the 4 journal prompts. Okay. So 1, what helps me feel most alive? And I'll write these out and put them in the show notes for you. 2, what childhood passion would I like to reconnect with? So, of course, for me, it's ballet. For you, with a green smoothie option, it may just be like a special treat every day or something that I'm doing that is good for me. 3, is there a class, camp, festival, or workshop or challenge, right, that you could sign up for that would get you there, like a green smoothie challenge, right? And then 4, what level of discipline could I commit to? Like, what is it that I feel like I need to actually make this happen? Whew. All right. So I hope this has been helpful as I've walked you through this whole experience, this whole journey, the past year of efforts and work towards becoming a pink fairy in the group piece, Sleeping Beauty, and then also my solo to Les Sophies. And I'll have a link to the performance in the show notes along with the very last year's performance, Lilac Fairy. And I welcome any questions or feedback or comments you might have. And I hope this is helpful as you think about pursuing and nurturing and growing and shedding or putting sunlight and fertilizer on your own dreams and bringing those to fruition. Because I have to say in midlife, I think for a lot of us, it's like, oh, well, what's next for this second half of my life, right? And it's worth really looking at and thinking about what brings you joy. And let's do more of that. All right, loves, thanks for tuning in. And a gentle reminder to sign up for Love Notes if you're not yet, KimberlyWilson.com/Love Notes. There's also a link to my books and my clothing line and more ways to find and stay connected over at KimberlyWilson.com. And I, again, can't thank you enough for your support during this long journey and during the healing of my hip replacement and the launch into my 51st year. Thanks for being a part of it. It truly means the world.